Well, while our questions are rolling in here, I'd love to take this opportunity just to ask our panelists, Michael and Liz and Jenny, from your perspective as a social worker, chaplain, nurse, did any of this message or story resonate with you? Liz, could we turn to you as a chaplain first?
Yeah, I was really moved and I resonated deeply with the tension around taking away someone's hope. And so part of what we work to do as spiritual counselors is to maybe offer different ideas about what that hope could be. Instead of length of days, it might be a special occasion. Some people are waiting for a birthday, and maybe we could move the date of celebrating that birthday up. For some people of faith, they're looking for a miracle. And there's a gentle invitation available for knowing that many faith traditions talk about being sown perishable and raised imperishable, that the full miracle is sometimes on the other side of this earthly walk. So it's a way to explore with families, what's their real hope, and very gently and lovingly helping them redefine what that might be.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Michael, as a social worker, anything stand out to you?
Absolutely. This story is so familiar to doing this work for so many years, to many folks that I've met, particularly the phrase life around care and moving to care around life really resonated to me. So many people we meet their lives are consumed in a way with the care that they have to, care plans that they try to follow, and all these procedures and medical visits, and it's overwhelming to people. And to move to a system of moving to care around their life and having quality of life often improves people's outcomes kind of dramatically, it seems, and the perspectives is what I mean to say. The perspective's a lot. It can really help families and patients both.
Yeah, very simple concept, but very difficult to execute, isn't it? With all the momentum in the health system. Jenny, as a nurse, anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I'm thinking of two particular patients right now and how families often want to protect their loved ones, especially elderly people. I'll have their sons and daughters come to me and say, don't mention hospice. We don't want her to know that she's on it. And with a dementia patient, that's often appropriate. But with any other kind of disease process, I usually tell them, you know what, they already know. And not talking about them is going to make them more afraid and anxious than if we just talk about it. And so I'm thinking of one particular patient that I saw recently. And after we had managed some symptoms, I asked the patient and her family, would you like to know more about what your final days might look like? And they said, yeah, we really would. And she wanted to know physically what she was going to go through. And once we talked about that, then we could talk about the fun parts of those last days. You know, does she want to have visitors in? Does she want music played? Does she want her dog lying beside her? What room does she want to be in? And it was a really enjoyable conversation that they could kind of, this was a patient that she liked being in control. And so she really appreciated being able to control all those aspects and her family knowing about them. The other family I was thinking about is kind of the flip side of that. Elderly woman doesn't like the family dynamics are such that they just don't talk about those kind of things, never have, and it's uncomfortable. So when I was alone with her, I asked her, you know, what do you think is happening? Because she's declining. Do you think things are changing? She looked at me. She said, I'm good. I said, are you? She said, I am. And then she started talking about the weather and other things. And it was her way of saying, you know what? I don't want to go there. Whatever happens, happens. So, yeah, the conversations can go either way. But I think addressing that elephant, walking to the other side of the elephant, like you said, and seeing what they want to do with it is helpful.
Yeah, I think you're raising an important issue here, which is if we're talking about breaking the silence and the tyranny of silence around these conversations, You can't force them. You can't just shatter the silence and force your agenda. You need to talk about this. It's got to be a mutually respectful journey together. I want to turn to our first question, and Ron, this is directed to you.
Okay.
Have you had conversation with your sister-in-law regarding her thoughts about your brother's experience and the decisions along the way?
Not deep conversations. We certainly spent time together at his funeral service and immediately after. We have spent time with, one of his sons who came and visited us. My brother lived in Michigan and came down to Virginia and had some conversation with one of his sons. But no, we haven't. I know she continues to suffer a good deal of grief, and that breaks my heart for her. So again, I don't know if her grief journey would have been any different than if things would have been different up front. But as we said, everybody has to map out their own journey. And I think Ken was one who wanted to go down swinging to be there for his family. And I respect that. And I respect those choices that they made. I look back on it with a lot of reflection and a lot of learning. But no, we haven't had a lot of in-depth conversation about it afterwards.
Okay. So there is a silence on both sides of before the loss and after the loss. Sometimes it can continue. Sometimes it's sort of buried under the grief and the loss and just getting one foot in front of the other. And time doesn't heal. It takes effort and intention and an open heart to heal in these kinds of losses. The next question I'm going to address I'll address this one myself. Does Piedmont, Hospice of the Piedmont, provide palliative care to individuals not yet needing hospice care? And we touched on that. We hinted at it in just a little while ago. In that, we have an arm now called Piedmont Care, which is home-based palliative care. And yes, they take care of patients that are not in hospice. They take care of patients that have serious life-limiting illnesses, usually with a life expectancy of a year or 2 or 3. And the focus of palliative care in that setting is on improving quality of life. Palliative specialists are experts in symptom management, so they see people with all kinds of diagnoses and associated symptom burdens, tending to that to improve quality of life. And as we've been talking about, they're also really skilled at these challenging conversations. So they will help families have these conversations upstream well before it might be time to consider hospice. There's lots of living to do with serious illness, just as there's lots of living to do when you're in hospice. So I'd like to turn to another question. And I'm going to address this I'll let the panelists choose on this one. End of life is not just a medical event. Our family dynamics are really challenging. How can your team help us deal with this? And this is one of the beauties. Michael, would you mind starting with that one as a social worker?
Sure, absolutely. We work with families in a way as much as we do with patients, from my perspective. I see family members just as often and work with them in sometimes a counseling role, as does Liz, and actually often our nurses very much as well, really giving a lot of counsel to people. Family members too, helping guide. One of the things we always want to make sure is that people feel in control as much as they can, what we call autonomy. And we want to make sure patients feel that they have the ability to decide what they wish for. And families need a lot of guidance sometimes in that. So we participate with everybody, anybody that wants to be in terms of family involved in those conversations. Does anybody else want to?
Yeah, I don't mind chiming in. I think one of the gifts that we can offer as part of a team is that we're not actually part of that family system. And we know that a lot of the dynamics that have happened because of injuries, pain, intended or unintended. And sitting as a neutral, compassionate presence can begin to bring those to light. And we don't have really any investment in outcome. So we can begin to allow each person to have their voice and maybe even hear one another in a fresh way.
The two words that come to mind when I hear that question with challenging families is facilitation and boundaries. Michael and Liz, they know how to talk to people. I can help you with your nausea, but I don't always know those conversations. So it's great that we can have team meetings, and when a patient or family member says, oh man, we got all this stuff going on, I might suggest, how about if I have our social worker and chaplain come with me to the next meeting? You bring in whoever you want, and we can help facilitate that conversation. It makes it a little safer than the family doing it on their own. The other thing that can do is set some boundaries for them, to kind of help them visualize what that might look like and make some suggestions to help those challenges.
Well, I might be the only one in the room here that grew up in a perfect family, but families are messy. And when you put them under stress, you see both the strength and resilience and beauty of families, and you can really see the dysfunction and shattering of families. And that's what we encounter day in and day out. And I think what you're hearing here is this kind of team-based care, family-focused care is the best way to address the complex needs of a patient and their family with serious illness, pre-hospice or with hospice. Thank you. Well, let's go to another question. And this is, do you have a recommendation for an optimal time to introduce a palliative care physician to an oncology patient with progressing disease? This goes back to that TEML study, where the TEML study, again, done about 10 years ago, took patients with cancer and entered them with palliative supportive services at the time of diagnosis. And then they took a control group and followed both groups, one that had palliative support and one that did not, and they just followed them forward for a couple of years. There wasn't any impact on the treatment decisions of what kind of chemo regimen they get, et cetera. They matched them up, and then they followed them forward. And what they found was, as I said earlier, the patients with palliative support lived longer, lived better, stayed out of the hospital, and cost less money to the system as a whole. And it was simply because of this attention on symptom management and for the support of real conversations as well. So my answer would be the sooner the better. Many oncologists are open to a collaborative relationship with palliative doctors. Some of them still see palliative as sort of pre-hospice or the same as hospice, and we're not ready for them yet. But if you're finding yourself walking beside a loved one with cancer and you're worried about symptoms that aren't well controlled, or where are we in this? And let's have a real talk here. That's a good time to ask the oncologist. What do you think about asking a palliative colleague to fold into the care here?
Tim, just a quick thought. I just read this quote earlier today, as a matter of fact. And when someone has a life-limiting diagnosis, the saying was, "It's always too early until it's too late."
Yeah.
And so, obviously, we believe earlier is better.
Yeah. Somebody asked a related question of how do you find a palliative specialist? And we are really fortunate in this community. We have a fantastic palliative program at UVA, a fantastic palliative program at Sentara Martha Jeff. Hospice of the Piedmont has a home-based fantastic program called Piedmont Care. Augusta has a robust program. So this whole area is very well equipped with palliative services. Your doctors know us. Your doctors know the palliative providers in the area. That's a good place to start, but Google it. You'll find us readily, as anybody in today's world does. Let's go to another question. this is what happens once you enter hospice. I was with my father at home when he died. Luckily, his neighbor was a hospice nurse. Jenny, would you mind starting with that? Can you step us through what's it look like when you go into hospice?
Sure. A nurse will come out and admit you. That just means she's going to come and do a little physical, get some information from you. You sign some consents. After that, the team descends upon you, which might feel overwhelming at first. But the nurse, you'll get a team. And the way I explain it to my patients is that you're the captain of the team. So you call all the shots. I'm going to be your nurse, and I'll handle the medical aspects of things, nausea, constipation, pain, all that type of stuff, and be in touch with your doctor. The social worker, Michael, I say they handle everything else. So that's emotional, spiritual, financial, all types of things. And we have a chaplain also that can help you with spiritual needs. And then we have a home health aide. So I let them know up front that you're going to have a whole team of people here. You can use as much or as little of them as you want. From after that, as a nurse, I'll be coming out at least once a week to check on you, see how your symptoms are. We also talk a lot about your goals right at the onset when you sign up for hospice. What is it that you want? Would you rather not have a lot of pain and be alert? Those kind of things, or if there's any, like Liz was saying, events coming up that are important to you.
Let me add, because there was another question about this, and Ron, perhaps you'd like to speak to this, but because the question also was about what about after the death? What kind of support does the surviving family members get from a hospice service?
We have very talented grief and bereavement counselors. And when someone passes, a member of our team will reach out to that family and offer grief support. And that grief support can come in many different forms. It can be one-on-one counseling. It can be group counseling. Our Center for Grief and Healing are very skilled at supporting families after death. There's also times where patients that do not receive services from Hospice of the Piedmont need that grief and bereavement support. And we will welcome anyone that needs that support to take advantage of those services offered by this talented team of counselors. So we'll not only care for patients or family members of patients, but also of community members. And the last thing I'll mention too, we have a Center for Children. And oftentimes children suffering a loss, that's oftentimes from sudden death. Patients that are not on hospice, and they need a lot of support. So we have a group of therapists that work specifically with children to meet their needs. The Center for Grief and Healing, the Center for Children are supported by philanthropic support. So we're very blessed in this community to have donations that come in to be able to allow Hospice of the Piedmont to support our community beyond what it is we do in caring for our patients' families specifically.
Thanks, Ron. Michael and Liz, I want to address this next question to you too. Control of symptoms, particularly anxiety, is fundamental to quality of life. How do palliative care physicians address anxiety about pain and other symptoms so that patients are not feeling excess anxiety? Michael, you bridge both in the palliative world and the hospice world. Why don't you start with how do we approach this?
Sure. One of the ways I often phrase it to people in a way that's understandable for people that don't work in the medical field is to say symptoms kind of are circular. So if you're having pain, for example, you're often having anxiety or breathing distress. If you're having anxiety, you might feel your pain in a sharper way. So we want to make sure that we're looking at both and trying to manage all symptoms. Luckily, there's a lot of tools at medical practitioners' disposal, physicians and nurse practitioners and whatnot, to utilize medically. But then we want to look at the family systems, counseling, all sorts of things in order to address all the ways that pain can be experienced. So pain, of course, simply isn't just physical. There's emotional pain, there's spiritual pain, many things. And we want to make sure that we're touching and addressing all those issues. Looking at one without the other is not complete, and it's not closing that circle. So we want to touch on all those things if we can. And if people are experiencing one, we need to try to focus on that with them.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Liz, do you want to add anything?
Sure. In my experience, people often have some anxiety about unresolved family issues, things that they haven't expressed forgiveness for or asked forgiveness for. And that's some of the work that we can do as spiritual counselors. And sometimes people have been told some really scary things about the afterlife. And there's an opportunity there to ask what have they heard? What do they believe? What are some other ways of thinking about that, just to open up some of those things. Sometimes the anxiety is just about feeling like there's no one you can safely say it to. And we become safe people for you to be able to say what needs to get said, to have a sense of peace and comfort and resolution at end of life.
Yeah, this is a great question because I think it illustrates how important it is that we as healthcare team members offer both clinical competence and compassion. And if we're not competent at good symptom management, tending to whether it's anxiety or pain or shortness of breath or sleep disturbance, we can't really get to the more important, deeper, richer aspects of palliative and hospice medicine. Those matters of the heart, those issues that you're touching on, relationships, closures, forgiveness, etc. So it's a great question. I think it also raises the issue of, what's important to people when they're staring down the barrel of mortality. And that's where a lot of this anxiety circles around. What's important to people at the end of life first is comfort. And so this question of anxiety about being uncomfortable is very, very common. Second is control. They want a sense of control of their destiny, and they lose all sense of control often. They come into the hospital setting, and all control is yanked away from them, unintentionally, but absolutely. And the third thing that is most important to people staring down the barrel of mortality is they're worried about their family. They are making decisions oftentimes more about their family than about themselves. And their greatest fear, the greatest fear of somebody facing dying, is the fear of abandonment, is the fear of being alone. So this is where anxiety finds its energy in these realms, and why it's important for an interdisciplinary team to approach these complex issues. So I'm going to turn to another question. I see your care team includes a chaplain. Will you be attempting to convert someone who's not religious? What denomination are your chaplains?
Oh, that's a really beautiful question, and the answer is no. We are not in the conversion business. We're really in the caring and compassion business. And so when I enter and meet family and patients, my standard intro is, "Hi, I'm Liz. I'm a chaplain," which means I have to kind of do the whoa. I'm here for your emotional support and your spiritual care, however you define it. All of our chaplains want to meet people where they are and care for them in whatever system of faith or just view of the world they have. We do have good relationships with all of the Catholic parishes. And so if that's a really important thing to have a sacramented end of life, we can make that happen. We also cultivate many interfaith relationships. We have a Jewish chaplain on staff, and we are in conversation with both Buddhist and Imam folks. So if that's your tradition, we will make sure that you're cared for in that way. One of the challenges at end of life is that folks often haven't been able to attend their church, and they've gotten disconnected. So we help that connection happen.
Yeah. Thank you. That's actually a very common concern. And thank you for clarifying that. This is the advantage of being a facilitator. You can take the easy question yourself and then give the hard ones to everybody else. I'm going to open this up to anybody. This is a really good question too. How do you suggest we start these conversations earlier with family members that are often not ready to have them?
I mean, my kids are in their 20s, and we start talking about it now. Of course, it helps that I'm a hospice nurse, but intergenerationally, even with my mom and my kids, her grandkids, we have these conversations. So I think if you think about, we are all dying. We all have that in common, every single one of us. Sometimes humor helps. And so just in the course of a lazy day, it can be brought up. You know, have you ever thought about what do you think you want to do when you die, Mom? Do you want to be buried? I just thought about that. What do you think? And so I think when we're in a healthy state, that's when we need to start talking about it.
I find many families also fall into that conversation driving home from a funeral from a friend or something like that. You know, something happened to somebody and it prompts you saying, well, if this was me, I wouldn't want this, or I would want this. That can be an opportunity to fall into that conversation. I think the other advice I would give, if you're struggling and you feel like we really need to have this conversation, but they're really recalcitrant and avoidant, this is where forms and advanced directives might be helpful. You know, can we just fill out this form? And we all know that the forms themselves don't really translate to impacting care at the end of life. It's the conversations around the form. But sometimes they can be a good facilitator to get a conversation started. And we have a robust, active, collaborative right now in our community, the Central Virginia Community for Advanced Care Collaborative. And, you know, there's forms, and you can get them online. You can get them at any of the hospitals. You can get them on our website. We use 5 Wishes. It's a it's a beautiful form that can facilitate a little bit more conversation. So can the post form here in Virginia, the more robust advanced care directive, an excellent way to stimulate a conversation. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? We have time for, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I resonate with Jenny's expression, and that the posture of curiosity, rather than going at it from sort of a morbid, sober, like, dun, 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 just to be like, I wonder, you know, have you ever thought of? Just in a light, warm, curious way is a great way to open the door.
Right, yeah. The curiosity and humility, I would add, are ways that invite discussion. You know, so and I'll tell you the other thing that I've seen. Moment is for my family has been a few television shows or movies that really speak to the heart. This Is Us. I mean, there are some powerful scenes in there that have prompted my wife and I to go to spaces that, you know, we wouldn't have gone to, otherwise. One more question, and then I'm going to turn back to Ron for some closing comments. And this could be any of you, but Ron, actually, this might be a good one for you to pivot on. What's the difference between different hospices?
Well, we're very proud of being in this community for the past 40 years. We are the only community-based, not-for-profit, and we are governed by a board of trustees who take their role in working with a community asset very, very seriously to assure that it is sustaining. I think the thing that differentiates Hospice of the Piedmont are the things that I mentioned earlier. We go well beyond just caring for our hospice patients, and we care for the community, caring for people that have grief issues, caring for children that wouldn't have a place to turn. There's music by the bedside and massage therapy and pet therapy, things that Hospice of the Piedmont will offer our patients that go above and beyond the traditional delivery of care. So we're very proud of some of the initiatives that we're doing to go beyond simply providing hospice care. And I think that's a differentiation as a not-for-profit provider in our community.
Well, thanks. And I will add to that, we have a robust program for our veterans that is just a beautiful program. We are embarking on a death doula program and training of death doulas as they are able to reach people that don't reach hospices for various reasons. So we really are community looking to care for community. Ron, before you close, I'd just love to take this opportunity to apologize that we couldn't get to all the questions. There were a lot of questions rolling in, and thank you very much for those. And just to say thank you for your engagement. I can tell by the quality of the questions in this room, there's a lot of wisdom in this room and a lot that we have to learn from you, just as we learn every day and have the privilege of learning every day from the families we get to take care of. Ron, would you like to close us?
Well, I simply want to say, what a good conversation. And I want to finish the way I started by saying thank you. We all know talking about death is uncomfortable. And here you were, listening and engaging to this conversation. It takes some courage to talk about end of life for yourself or for your loved one. It will take many more community conversations to break this tyranny of silence and find our voice at the end of life. We look forward to more conversations. These community conversations events will be held quarterly. Our next one will be in June. We'll send you an email and get the word out to the community in hopes that you'll join us again. This session was recorded and we'll post it on our website if you would like to share it with others. Also, if you'd like to talk to someone, please reach out to us. You can call us at the office at 817-6900, or you can go to our website and click on Contact Us, and we'll be sure to connect with you. I want to say thank you to my coworkers for the work they do every day. I am so fortunate to work with 200 colleagues that are so talented, so committed to serving our patients and families facing serious illness, death, and grief. For all of us at Hospice of the Piedmont, we are grateful to have the privilege of sharing this journey with our patients and families. I want to thank Dr. Short, Jenny, Michael, Liz. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. Also, I want to thank Brandon Sutherland from Wind Technologies, who helped produce this program, and my colleague, Rachel Palm, who coordinated all the details to bring this program to you. We're looking forward to our next community conversation in June. Finally, I will say, Ken, I love you and I miss you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.